Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to ArtBreak at AMP. I'm so happy you're with us again today, here together on this wintry but sunny afternoon outside. If you're in the Philly area, I hope it's a great day to take a brisk walk, spend a little time outside. I hope you're well and safe. My name is Dejay Duckett, and I'm the curator at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. As you know, ArtBreak is a time to take a break away from your normal daily routines and activities, hop on during your lunch break from school or from work. Just take time to be refreshed with us, talk about art, see some and learn about some wonderful artists. Some maybe that you'll want to do a deep dive on in the future, but hopefully this hour that you spend with us will spark your curiosity about some incredible work. Now, as you may know, our February art breaks have been just phenomenal. We've partnered up with our friends and colleagues from WHYY to take you on a behind-the-scenes look at their latest episodes of Movers and Makers. Now, this is a wonderful WHYY original program that spotlights extraordinary people and artists, past and present, from across our city. Last week, we were joined by Movers and Makers producer Karen Smiles. We had a great conversation. She was in conversation with master printmaker and photographer John Dowell. And we learned so much about John's artistic practice and process as a contemporary Philadelphia artist. And today we're going to go back in time and talk about a 20th century documentary photographer and legend. We're going to talk about the legacy of Mr. Jack T. Franklin. Now, Jack Franklin dedicated his life to chronicling the lives of Black Philadelphia and beyond. And we're so excited about this collaboration with WHYY to talk about Franklin and his work. Both of our nonprofit organizations do need your support, and your memberships do matter. So please keep that in mind, and you can go to both of our websites, HYY and AMP, to support us and join us. Some of you may be asking, who is Jack T. Franklin? You may not recognize his name off the bat, but he's responsible for photographing truly iconic moments in history that you would undoubtedly recognize. Franklin was born in 1922, and he photographed every aspect of Black life from the 1960s until his passing in 2009, from famous musicians and entertainers to everyday life and work in the city. People from all walks of life were in his work. He was present for seminal moments in civil rights history, locally and nationally, from the Girard College protests, the Black Power conferences. His work appeared in Ebony, Jet, the Philadelphia Tribune, many local publications. And in 1986, Jack Franklin gifted over 500,000 images, that's contact sheets, negatives, and photographs to the African American Museum in Philadelphia. It's a cornerstone of our collection, and we're so proud. And today we're going to get to share a few of these gems with you. So we're going to talk about Jack Franklin's work, how his legacy has carried on to this day through the work of contemporary local photographers, how smartphones and technology has changed the landscape of documentary photography. And to do that, joining us today, we have two special ArtBreak guests. We have Naomi Brito, and it's been just a pleasure working with Naomi over the past few months, and just her professionalism and her eye for detail is just incredible. She's a documentary filmmaker and media educator who produces for WHYY and the Movers and Makers series. Before that, Naomi worked as an associate producer for the Emmy-winning feature documentary, The Pursuit, 50 Years in the Fight for LGBT Rights. Naomi is from the DC area, but she's been in Philadelphia for the past 20 years, so we definitely claim her as a Philadelphian now. And in addition to producing documentary, Naomi has taught media courses at Temple University, at Rowan University, and Philly CAM. Our other guest today is Richard J. Watson. And this is a person, an artist, a mentor that many of us through the city know and love. He is an icon of the Philadelphia art world, a 1968 graduate of the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, where he's taught at his alma mater, and he has served in the exhibitions department at AMP since the 1980s. He's exhibited his work for decades, and his work is held in hundreds of public and private collections, including the Pertucci Family Foundation Collection, the Pennsylvania Academy for the Fine Arts, Sony, the Federal Reserve Bank, the City of Philadelphia, and many, many others. I might add, Richard is going to have a solo exhibition at the African American Museum in Philadelphia in the fall of 2021. So please stay tuned for more about that. With that, I am going to pass our ArtBreak mic over to Naomi Brito, and she's going to tell us more about this special Movers and Makers episode that features Jack Franklin.
Great, Dejay, thank you. Hi, Richard. I'm really excited to be here on behalf of WHYY. As Dejay mentioned, I am one of the producers of the original production. It's an arts and culture documentary series called Movers and Makers. And we cover arts and culture defined pretty broadly in Philadelphia, parts of Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, and Delaware. So we have a pretty broad scope. We're airing right now Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. on WHYY TV, but you can check us on our website and follow us on our Instagram. I'll drop those links in the bio. I co-produced this special episode. It's a half-hour show of Movers and Makers, specifically focused on Black image makers with my co-producer, Karen Smiles. In that half hour, there are 4 stories, and it moves chronologically through time, which is really nice. We start with the African American collection at the Philadelphia Library Company, which is the country's first lending library. And they have a pretty astounding collection, including friendship albums by prominent African American abolitionists, which are some of the first ever signed artwork by African Americans documented in this country. Then Karen's fantastic piece on John Dowell and his project Cotton. And then this segment that I produced on Jack Franklin and his pretty amazing and vast collection. And then finally, a spotlight on a current contemporary photographer really walking in Franklin's footsteps, who's been documenting all of the protests that have erupted after the murder of George Floyd. And so that's the full show. Jack is one of those segments. I'm really excited to be, it was really hard to fit someone's entire life into 6.5 minutes. That's always a challenge. I was drawn to Franklin, because I had not heard his name before. And sometimes I'm like, oh, that's on me. But in doing research, realized that his name is maybe not as recognized as some of his contemporaries, despite his enormous catalog and despite the fact that he was there for really seminal events. One of the things that really was of interest to me, especially, was he seemed to have a sense that this collection would one day be of significance, this real sense of posterity. So not only did he sort of seem to have this compulsion, and I'm no expert on him, but he really thoroughly cataloged all of his work and he took really careful notes. And so that's always interesting, that he had an idea that maybe one day we'd be sitting here discussing his work after his passing. In the piece, you'll see that I interviewed Dr. Watson, Dejay, who's here, Dr. Deborah Willis, who's obviously a famous artist, photographer, and scholar, and then had the pleasure of interviewing Jack's niece, Miss Yvonne Jones, who still lives in Philly. And just a little tidbit, it was really amazing to see that he really comes from a family that have a deep photographic tradition. It really kind of amazed me that they had family portraits going back really centuries and generations. And that was really, and even Miss Jones herself just had so many albums and was also a collector. So he clearly comes from this legacy of sort of documentation and collection and really sort of taking care with those artifacts. And then I think lastly, as Dejay said, it's, you know, he's a Philadelphia native son. And so it's always really wonderful to spotlight those people who are from Philly and have had such an impact here locally and also nationally. So I think we're going to queue up the segment. Again, it's about 6.5 minutes, and hopefully gives you a little bit of a glimpse into sort of the vastness and the import of Jack Franklin's career.
I must face the fact that it is a sad experience at this stage of the 20th century to have to stand in the city that has been known as the cradle of liberty, that has in its midst and in its presence a kind of Berlin Wall to keep the colored children of God out.
Girard College happened on May 1st, 1965. I don't know how Jack knew about that because it was supposed to be a secret. Jack was there constantly, so he shot this day, and it was a beautiful photograph because, you know, there's policemen in there, the uniforms, the top brass were there, and it was kind of cool. Yeah, but at the same time, he also shot the brutality of some of the things that broke out while they were demonstrating for that 7 months and 17 days. And he shot things all around the city from an observer's point of view, not from a participant's point of view. It was a beautiful way that he was there.
Jack's photographs. He photographed Sammy Davis Jr., Harry Belafonte. He photographed the known people and the community people, the lawyers, the domestic workers, and not from afar. He photographed, he was right next to them. So he was in lockstep with the people in the community and the noted figures in the larger world. So when we think about the notion of Black Lives Matter as a movement, he knew it then.
Sometimes he was on the ground at the March on Washington, from Selma to Montgomery. But he also was there for small acts of resistance that happened in Philadelphia every day. Those are the moments that 50 to 100 years down the road, it becomes arguable if those moments ever existed without this documentation. And we can't let our history become arguable. There are actually 500,000 images in the collection, which is just staggering and amazing. When you think about one person taking this many photographs, and that includes not only the prints, but there's contact sheets, negatives, slides. There's even some ephemera that he collected over the years from different events that he attended, different pamphlets and programs and things like that. So it really does take a complete picture of the life of this very important photographer. Jack Franklin was born in 1922 in Philadelphia. He went to Simon Gratz High School. He actually joined the Army right out of high school and was a photographer during World War II while serving in the Army. It was when he returned back to Philadelphia that he started doing staff and freelance work for the different publications throughout the city. These are the publications that were how we really understood what was happening in the Black communities. It was not through the mass media, it was through the Tribune and Jet and Ebony. Jack Franklin was making those images accessible from the beginning.
When you have a calling, you have to do it. This is a photo of my Uncle Vincent, my Uncle Jackie's older brother, And here's Uncle Jackie in his glory. We knew that if there was going to be a Black Panther rally, my Uncle Jackie would be there. We knew if someone was having their 70th birthday, he would be there. He was always trying to get the best shot, and he was going wherever there was a shot to be taken. I think he was interested in people because we came from a family where everyone was interested in people. You had to socialize. You belonged to a church, you belonged to a community, and you did volunteer work. So that's part of his birth DNA.
Jack allowed people to be the witness to the event. He has photographs where people can look at them and pick themselves out from 20 years ago. I've seen pictures of myself in 1964, 65 in a reception somewhere in the audience talking to someone. So there was no boundary that Jack set aside to say, I'm not going to go beyond this point. Jack didn't have any boundaries in the way he approached people with his camera.
I think he thought that he should give those photographs and let people decide if they really meant something to history, Black history. Should they be taken seriously? We took them seriously, but should the world take them seriously? And he would let the future decide if his stuff was relevant or not.
It's relevant. It's relevant to our mission, it's relevant, and it's also important that we honor ourselves that way. People are of value, regardless of their commercial value. People have an intrinsic human value. And I think the man on the street going to work or people getting off from work, tired at the end of a day, they are valuable to the continuity of our experience as people. So when you can see people about their business of being human beings, Jack's collection is full of that kind of stuff. You find nothing but people who are people being people.
Such a wonderful segment. It was just so beautifully done. I think it just encapsulated Jack Franklin and his work. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Naomi. Richard Watson, I wanted to start with you because not only I have memories of, I was at the museum at first in the late 90s, before I came back in 2017.
Yeah.
And Richard was there in the 90s, and I have such vivid memories of you and Jack Franklin used to come through a lot. He would come through, he'd have his beret on, and he and Richard would talk about so many of these moments that are in these photographs. So Richard, as both a friend of Jack Franklin, and also you were the subject in so many of these photographs also because you were on the scene at Girard College and many other events in the city. Can you talk a little about what these photographs and his process kind of meant to you?
Yeah, well, I'd like to share some things with you all about Jack Franklin that probably no one will ever read about. And Jack and I were night people. During the 60s, we were very agile and very active in social life after hours. As a matter of fact, Jack shot a lot of his photographs in the community in night spots, places called like the Postcard on South Street, different bars, because he took photographs for people like the Scoop USA and the Nightlife, which was a trade bar paper that advertised social gatherings. And you will find some of those still out there today. Scoop USA is still in effect. So the relationship went beyond just the civil rights arena and what Jack used to call hoity-toity social events. And it was a matter of really down-to-earth connection with somebody from the community who had no idea what the relevance of his work in future days would mean to this city and to this country, and to people who want to study a real scenario of what life was about in Philadelphia from top to bottom. At the museum level, when I was working at the museum, it's just so serendipitous that Jack popped up there. And it was a wonderful thing because there was a cadre of brotherhood and camaraderie in the professional fields. And also that left the profession and came into a nose to nose and shoulder to shoulder kind of social involvement too. So Jack was good as he was a chameleon. Jack could be at a board meeting and take pictures in his suit and his tie if he had to, but that was very rare because you would always see Jack with his beret, and he had about 15 ballpoint pens up there in his pocket. And everybody knew Jack. He could go in any place. They knew who he was when he came in. And if they asked for ID, Jack said, "Oh, it's just me." He would float on through. So he had a very, very easy way of connecting with people. And that's an essential part of what Jack left behind. You have to be a people person in order to capture people in their most sincere moments, in their most authentic moments. So Jack's photography is about authenticity. It catches people in their candid situations where most people, when you say, "Take my picture," and they're posing for the picture, Jack said, "I got you. I took the picture already before you start all that posing." So he taught me a lot of little tricks about how to catch people in their most candid, sincere, authentic states. And the same as with being a painter, when you're painting people, you want to bring out the essence of the person without them putting on that smile. Mm-hmm. And you want to capture them as you see them being themselves. So that's what got Jack his sense of respect and a sense of appreciation wherever he was.
And Richard, on that note, I would love to pull up an online exhibition that we did at AMP almost a year ago, Through His Eyes. This is an exhibition that was actually in person only for a month in January 2020. We put this exhibition in our auditorium. It was guest curated by Rachel Nelson, and she was a 2019 curatorial intern who was really struck by Jack's work, particularly as she was looking at the civil rights era work. She was really struck by the presence of youth, of children, of young people. Sometimes when you're looking at Black and white imagery, it kind of masks the youth of the people in the photo because you kind of associated with, this older, generation. And we sometimes forget how young people were on the scene, both as activists and being there with their parents and families. And this was something that really attracted Rachel to the work. So we rather quickly were able to translate the exhibition into an online exhibition that so people could still experience Through His Eyes. Now, one thing I want to point out is that there is original music that was composed for this online site by our own Richard Watson. And it is just perfect. I want that to play for a little bit while we scroll through a few of the images, and we're going to end up in Bearing Witness in that section.
I know about the heartbreak and I know about the heartaches. I know what it feels like to have food to eat. Don't you know that power in the hands of a fool is like a gun in the hands of a child running wild. Running wild. The rats you say are friendly and the roaches move too fast. outside my windowsill. It's glowing through the glass. Nothing moves at daybreak there. Nobody feels the sun. We all caught up in a losing game that gets us one by one by one. Don't you know that power in the hands of a...
I just wanted to play that little snippet. Thank you, Jam.
Wow.
Richard Watson, and the composition so perfectly. I mean, it was really emotional for me going through the images and listening to that music. Um, and I was wondering, Richard, if you could kind of talk a little bit of what inspired you as you created that before we kind of dive into a couple of the images.
Yes, I could. Well, I've been writing songs for 50 years or more, and that song was about 35 years old, or maybe even more, because from the 60s on, I started to write poetry and a lot of songs, you know, with the guitar slung over my shoulders. I liked Richie Havens and Taj Mahal and Bob Dylan. And I was really into folk music quite a bit, and a self-taught guitarist, banjo, and all of the other string instruments I could get my hands on. And I always wrote about what I saw, you know, in terms of just the way I said Jack is about being connected. I've written things about tragedy and love and idealism and courage, and you know, it's across the board. So I won't go there right now because that's coming up later in the
in the October show. Let's look at the image of Leon Sullivan and his son. There we go. Yes.
Mhm.
And this is just this image kind of struck me, Richard, and you touched on this earlier, because I think with a documentary photographer, it's more than being in the moment. They almost have to be like a couple of seconds ahead of the moment. You know, as they're, you know, taking pictures and, you know, clicking away. And I have such profound respect for being a photographer at this time, because, you know, now you can take the picture, take a look, see if it worked, and then, oh, that didn't work. Let's take some more. Let's try. You know, I think that his work had to be so intuitive. And so he had to have such an understanding of human interactions and idiosyncrasies to be able to kind of, you know, to click and to keep clicking and to know when he wanted to hit that shutter. It's just an amazing thing, you know, the way he'll capture a fleeting glance, like in this image, and it's just amazing to me.
You know, on that note, you know, Jack always said it's not about the person you're shooting. It's about the circumstance and the environment into which you are taking that shot. This photograph of Dr. Sullivan and his son is very appropriate for that young man who is typical of the old men who he will someday become, and how his position at that time in his life, he was getting a chance to experience life at a different level. Than he was not a child in that gathering. He's older beyond his years because he's involved in the real life situation. And Jack, when he takes those shots, emphasizes that don't wait for the shot. You got to feel the shot you should take. Because when you wait for a shot, you're trying to get something that's somewhat superficial to your purposes of being there. So don't wait till you can find a space. You shoot between the elbows and the legs and knees if you have to. And that also demonstrates the tone and the energy of the crowd, because the crowd photographs make the substance of the image even more valid than just shooting people standing against a wall with their hands on their hips.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at the men in the background, and they're all, you know, looking. They all have a different line of sight. There's one man who's whispering on the edge. It almost has a painterly, appeal to it. And you can kind of feel that energy, that he's managed to capture in this moment, which I just love. I encourage you to take a look through the Through His Eyes exhibition, to just be able to take time and look through these photographs. They are simply astounding. Every time I look through them, I'm kind of drawn in by something different.
Yeah, and
Yes,
I was able to interview Rachel Nelson, who curated this exhibit and now is teaching history, middle school history in Baltimore. And she's really impressive. So we'll be putting out a little web special just to have Rachel talking about this exhibit. But actually, I had a question for you, Richard. I mean, in looking at these photos, you get the sense that, and even in seeing Jack, in his self-portraits with cameras around his neck, this is not someone who's shooting with a long lens. This is somebody who is up close. And that is, I think, what really comes across to me is this is somebody who is there. He is right there. Because today it is so easy for so many photographers to be really at a distance and to catch images. And I always find it a little disingenuous, but I understand it. And I think that is what appeals to me so much about these photos, is that he's in the crowd.
Well, yeah, as metaphorically speaking, it's easier to take the kiss when it's there than to sneak up on somebody and try to get a kiss. So Jack's way of immersing himself into a crowd made him a part of the crowd. That means he could come up to somebody's face and shoot them in their most authentic moment without somebody saying, "Oh, don't take my picture." And that's the one thing that photographers tend to be cautious of. What is he going to say if I get up there and take this picture? Is he going to say, "Get out of my face with that camera"? It never happened with Jack, because he made people comfortable with himself, and he was good to ease on through and feel a part of it. So that's an important part for people to understand.
Yeah, I think relationships in photography, particularly in documentary photography, is so important. I think John Dowell, at our last talk, he talked about that too. Talking to the cotton farmers, and when he was trying to get into buildings to take his night shots. I think that's that is one of the hidden talents that I think goes hand in hand with doing this kind of work.
Wow, that's a great photograph. That is a great photograph. I remember so many days of those kinds of people with their children, even the commitment of carrying a child around Girard College wall. That is no easy feat, to walk around in the summertime with 3 children or 2 children and having to carry one about 1.5 miles around that wall. So it's commendable that the force of people who came out to support this movement was so courageous and endearing to the community, and these people are still around. I want to thank people while I'm here, because people who are not recognized as we are, who came out to march, even if they came out for a couple of hours, they deserve credit for the desegregation of Girard College as much as we do in terms of the freedom fighters who were there. And as a result of that, tomorrow at Girard College, it's going to be a mural unveiled. There's a press conference at 12, and that mural is in recognition of the freedom fighting campaign and people who helped to break the will and integrate Girard College. That's a new mural on the Philadelphia mural art scene. So I would just say to people watching this telecast that they were part of that mural, and we all have to say that we were a community. It was a community that made that happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. We may be able to put up a link or information about that in the chat for those who might be interested. Naomi, I love how you were able to delve into the family history and past, the environment that kind of shaped Jack Franklin. And you also, I believe, had a chance to look at and talk to a contemporary photographer. And could you tell me about any strings or threads of legacy that you saw, even though, you know, these were people who were separated by many, many years? What did you see that maybe piques your curiosity?
Yeah, so the contemporary photographer is Isaac Scott. He is a Tyler graduate student. He's a ceramicist, and when COVID happened, his studio shut down and he lost access to it, and didn't really have much photography experience, and picked up a camera and just started. He showed up at every single protest. And I think Isaac, what he says in the segment in the interview that I did with him, is that it was really important for him to be at the protests that no other media were present at. And I think that kind of echoes some of Franklin's idea of what was important, and that what was important was not always what mass media or the rest of media thought was important, because he was there for so many events, not just the big iconic ones, but for the much smaller moments that really documented Black life in Philadelphia. And so I think that impulse, to me, is what makes both of their images so special, is the idea that there are these moments that are worth documenting and worth sharing that maybe aren't in that moment deemed important. So I think that's definitely one of the threads that I felt with these two photographers, and also just the sense that it was sort of a compulsion to photograph. Isaac really, once he started photographing, he couldn't stop. He felt like he couldn't miss anything, that it was his duty to be there. And Isaac talks about how he felt like it was important that people within the movement were telling the story and documenting the movement. And I know in talking with, Richard about Franklin, that he had this kind of, I could never really sort of figure out to what extent Jack felt like he was part of these movements or apart from these movements. And it sounds like he was pretty fluid. I mean, there was sort of no way not to be a part of it, as a Black man living during these times. But yeah, I think there are a lot of things that resonate. And it's unfortunate that Jack's photos still resonate so strongly today. And, they might be black and white, but so are Isaac's photos. Ironically, they're present photos, and his are all black and white. And so, that's very profound to see that history is still with us in this very, very upsetting and visceral way.
Well, Naomi, we have to understand that black and white photography has to be revered as the progenitor of what photography is about now. And Deborah Willis would probably agree that, the foundation of photography and photographers handling the medium and the printing and the darkroom practice really gives you an organic connection to your craft. And color, it's okay, but it can be manipulated so much. If you're in the darkroom with that fixer and that developer, and you got to make that happen, and it could go 100 different ways. So Gordon Parks and Roy DeCarava, all of those folk, Van der Zee, they had a knack for knowing how the exposure should go and when to stop it. So it's on the top realm. It's a top shelf craft.
Absolutely. And I think a lot about how, with the advent of of smartphones and social media, and looking at the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, how almost people are taking this photography in their own hands, and sometimes to their own possible peril, to document what's happening in the world, particularly to what's happening to Black lives. So it's this democratization of documentary photography on some level, because so many of us now are able to capture what's happening in our communities, and how this is reshaping our world. it's a pretty amazing thing. But at the same time, as I said, it gives me more appreciation for what Jack Franklin was doing, because it's so intuitive, and not having the ability to spot check what he was creating, and having this body of work as a result, it blows my mind. I wanted to bring in some of these images we saw, Naomi, in your piece, which was fantastic. I can't say it enough. I wanted to bring up a few of these images. I thought maybe our ArtBreak folks might enjoy looking at just some of the work. As I said, there are many entertainers, singers. This is, of course, Nat King Cole. When they would visit Philadelphia at concerts or events, Jack was always in the mix. Grover Washington Jr. And it's funny, we were just talking about this photograph because I'd always referred to it as the Mary Mason photograph. She was a WHYY pioneer broadcaster who was always in my home on WHYY. My parents listened to her religiously. She's with Count Basie. I think he's done a few things also. But Count Basie with Mary Mason, this is just a beautiful moment in both of their smiles. There's contact sheets in our collection, thousands and thousands of sheets. These are, you can see Stevie Wonder in the middle, surrounded by a bevy of beautiful women. Are they his backup singers? I don't know, Richard. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I can't say.
I'm not sure.
No. They're from that period of time, those young ladies could be a backup singer at the drop of a hat.
Jackson 5 contact sheets. These are just, it's just an amazing walk through time as you look through what Mr. Franklin had.
From the Uptown Theater, I might note too. Yeah.
Jay, can I ask a question? Since a portion of the exhibit or a portion of his collection is digitized, and obviously the majority of it is not, if you're interested in seeing more of the work, like who is it that accesses the archive? What is the process for that? I'm guessing obviously researchers, but just curious if there are plans in the works to make more of the collection accessible. I know that's an enormous undertaking.
It is absolutely an enormous undertaking. And right now, the museum has not reopened yet. So COVID has kind of thrown us a bit of a loop. So right now on our website, you can go into the collections tab and look through. Several hundred of the photographs are in there. So right now the access is limited to online. Once we open up, we have had researchers who say, I'm interested in this particular window of his work, and we can look up, we can do work on that. Leslie Willis and Brittany Webb in the past did such an amazing job cataloging the thousands of negatives, so that we are able to locate different time periods and images. You can see James Baldwin, Harry Belafonte in this image. It looks like they're at the Capitol, perhaps.
I think on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial.
I was going to say, those are the Lincoln Memorial columns.
Yeah, those columns, yeah.
Just so many amazing moments. I want to take a look. I want to make sure that I don't forget about our participants who may have some questions. You are always welcome to ask questions of our panelists. We will be happy to answer. let's see. There are links for the most recent Movers and Makers episodes. There's also, I see a link to the Free Library of Philadelphia. They had a blog post about remembering Dr. King's visit. So if you want to learn more about when Dr. King came to the Girard protests, you can take a look there.
Yeah, and I should say, I should credit that archival footage at the very beginning comes from Temple University from their special collections. And so what's interesting is they have moving image photo. So that's all local. I don't remember the station, but local news station footage. And I recently asked them to see what they could pull from the Black Power conference that was held in Philadelphia. There's images of Stokely Carmichael that Jack photographed. So they have some really neat moving image document sort of material there. So that's where that initial footage came from.
Okay. Thank you, Naomi. And Richard, you were one of the young people at Girard College during that time. That was, you were in your early 20s, I think?
I was 19. Yeah, it was a wonderful time of life to be involved, you know, in such a tremendous effort and to be a part of a group of people who stuck together. You know, it sort of like embellished my confidence and faith in belonging to something. I don't like belonging too much. You know, I'm a loner in terms of just being in control of what happens around me. But that was a family formed group of people who till today we are just like brothers and sisters in a group, you know, peas in a pod. So being a young guy who was an artist as well, you know what the 60s were about. You might have come in on the tail end, but it was a great time for life, for involving yourself in new dimensions, explorations, experimentation, and finding yourself within all of that. That was the courageous part. You had to find yourself within that mix. And I'm just grateful that I found my mission and I found my dedication and my passion and was able to make it beneficial to other people as well. So everything I've ever tried to do, I see how it can serve other people's something. So it's about being a part of the extended family.
And I hope that inspires young people today as well to get involved, to learn, you know, all they can about their history, and so they can be informed about what's happening now, what's happening today. That you don't have to be, you know, your parents' age, your aunts and uncles' age. You know, it starts now.
That's right. Absolutely.
And let me just go ahead and check one more time. I want to, before we close out, I do want to ask both of you what is next on your artistic journeys right now. What do you have in front of you that you might like to share? What's
You're talking to me, aren't you?
I'm talking to you, Naomi. I'd like to just give you a second.
Sure. I'm actually working, so we're wrapping up production of this third season of Movers and Makers, and I'm working on a half-hour special that looks at the future of monuments in Philadelphia, using the Rizzo statue and mural coming down as kind of the jumping off point, and it's discussions with local artists. I mean, I even interview Hank Willis, Deborah Willis's son. So that's going to be really interesting, and also looking really at murals in our city as sort of a possible counterpoint to some of the problems with traditional monuments. So that's coming down, and hopefully that'll be released late spring. So that's something to look for. But the show's still on the air. We have 2 more new episodes coming up, one on cultural preservation, which is going to be really, really interesting. Looks at how Chinatown has fared during this pandemic, the Nanticoke Lenape Eden Cemetery that Karen produced a piece on. And then we'll have a final episode really about how people have adapted in more joyous ways to some of the challenges of the pandemic. So.
Excellent. And I see someone has asked if there's a link to Naomi's work.
Mhm.
And they might, I would think that on the WHYY
If you
website.
follow the link that's above that links to the full Black Image Makers episode, like once you're there, you can then navigate to other episodes. And then I'll put the link for our YouTube page where you can then just look at individual segments for movers and makers. But yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. And Richard is hard at work. We are very excited about.
I'm doing some new things as well.
Yeah.
I have a lot of things on my plate, but right now I'm launching this. This is one of the. That's my grandfather in front, my father behind him, me in the corner, and my daughter looking through the crowd. So this is a part of my Watson Wear line of clothing that I'll be doing in terms of historic documentation of people's family connections, art to wear, one of a kind. You know, as a collage artist, everything is individually done, and so there'll be no two alike anywhere in the world. So I'm enjoying that, and I'm finishing up a book that I promised someone I would do, the 5th book for one publisher, a children's book, and I'm there. I'm overloaded, but at the same time, you know, if you could see my eyes, I didn't get a lot of sleep. But it's a wonderful time. Just be alert and to be present to the moment. That's all I can say. We have to be present to the moment because every day is a blessing, and I do what I can and I try to get it done.
I love the fact that you can have your ancestors and loved ones on your person at all times. That's beautiful.
They are around us anyway. You know, ancestors are why we're here. So I think just embracing their contributions to our physical being here is worthy of what we should be doing.
It's true. That's why Jack's work is so important. It really captured that. I want to thank both of you for joining us today. It has been an honor and a pleasure to gather to talk about this important work. And I hope that all of you will be able to join us at the next ArtBreak. Keep your eyes peeled for our March ArtBreak. We'll have another special guest. It is always, I always enjoy being here with our AMP folks and with our WHYY folks. We're all in one happy family. So thank you so much. Keep your curiosity going. There's so many links and you can explore and learn and enjoy some sunshine today. Thank you all very much. See you next time.
Thank you all. Been a pleasure.
Going through the glass. Nothing moves at daybreak then. Nobody feels the sun. We all caught up in a losing game that gets us one by one. Don't you know that power in the hands of a fool is like a gun in the hands of a child, running wild. When I never shot and heard the shot, you know you heard around the world. I bombed the church or shed the blood of a little baby girl. I never shot me a president, never burned a reservation. I never dropped that bomb upon another human nation. Don't you know that power in the hands of a fool is like a gun in the hands